Hello, this is Michael Stone, the host of We Earth Radio, where we have conversations that make a difference. We're committed to bringing you leading edge thinkers in the areas of environmental restoration, social justice, conscious evolution, and spiritual fulfillment. In our programs, we look for positive solutions to local and global issues that leave you touched, moved, and inspired to action. Our weekly guests include local and global experts and concerned citizens working together to heal the wounds that separate, alienate, and marginalize people. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to We Earth Radio. This is your host, Michael Stone, and we're going to talk about movement today and how the body moves. My guest is Betsy Polatin, MFA. She's an internationally recognized breathing and movement specialist who's been teaching for more than 40 years and is currently a master lecturer at Boston University's College of Fine Arts. Betsy's work is greatly influenced by the Alexander technique, somatic experiencing, breathing coordination, and the teachings of spiritual and meditation masters. She currently co-teaches an ongoing traveling workshop, Trauma in the Public Eye, with Peter A. Levine, and teaches Returning to Ourselves, the Wisdom of Trauma, with Dr. Gabor Mate. As a well-known educator, she has had numerous articles published in the Huffington Post and is the author of The Actor's Secret, and her latest book, which we're going to talk about today, Hugh Manual, a manual for being human, an epic journey to your expanded self. Betsy, welcome to We Earth Radio.
Thank you, Michael. It is absolutely a pleasure to be with you and be speaking with you and see where we go.
It's true. Well, let's start out with talking about your vision for writing another book. It's no small thing to do. So what was the vision behind this particular book?
Well, this book started a long time ago, probably 15 or so years. And I started to write it, and my daughter's a writer, and I told her my ideas, and she said, "Mom, that's like way too big and too much to put in one book. Why don't you start with something simple, like you've been teaching at, BU, Boston University, in the theater for many, many years. Why don't you write a book about your curriculum there, and that'll be easy, and you'll be able to do that quickly and easily, and then get to the next book." Well, I did that for The Actor's Secret. It was not quick, it was not easy, it was not simple. But I think it's a good book. There's a lot of information in there, and it's called The Actor's Secret, but I use the word, it is for performance and actors, but I use the word actor in the Shakespearean sense, in all the world's a stage, and we're all actors. We're all playing roles, and all the roles are suited, and they're difficult to change once we're in a role. So I wrote that, and the book does well. And then I thought, okay, now I get to do what I really wanted to do, which was Hugh Manual. And I think that, there's so many tangents of it that it's hard to speak about in a linear way, But I think if I would say what the essence or the uniqueness of it, because there are a lot of books, a lot of really good books out there for health and well-being and human potential, etc., is the combination of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, the physicality of how our body moves, our spirituality, the evolution of the species, and our present situation, all relating to each other. And actually, it's all one thing. And so, and there's that, and there's our inherent potential, which is it's just there. That's the expanded self. Nobody can take that away. Lots covers it up, but nothing can take it away. And so the different approaches in the book allow people to come in this way or come in that way or come in this way, and then see that that's related to the oneness and the whole, WHOLE. So
the two words that really, you just said one of them that really captured me are the expanded self and the embodied expansion. Can you elaborate on that and bring us into that world?
sure, it's interesting. I just told you all about the Actor's Secret book. I wanted the subtitle of The Actor's Secret to be Journey to an Expanded Self. And the publisher said, nobody will know what that means. No. And instead they put in techniques for transforming habitual patterns and improving performance, which is true. It is that. But to me, the expanded self, again, can be seen from so many different angles. It can be seen from a physicality of how we are in ourselves. And most people who are probably listening to this have some sense that many of us as young people were somehow constricted, given the environment, the situation, the surroundings. And so that constriction just prevented our expanded self. Another way is our thinking. This is how it should be done. This is what it is. And that my thinking is here, but there's this and there's that, there's this and there's that. And my thinking could expand. So there's levels to the expanded self that encompass so much. The expanded self is extraordinary, but also very ordinary.
What comes up for me, Betsy, in that is that when we say the expanded self, well, what are the limits? What are the parameters of the expanded self? Because in my 76 years, I have never seen such global divisiveness, alienation, anger, separation. So you're talking about the expanded self, and I think of non-duality, or what I call common unity, community. How can your work help us to tap into our innate capacity of what Thich Nhat Hanh might call interbeing?
When we separate from ourselves, a moment ago I was talking about back to childhood. So as a child, I have this desire or emotion or feeling, and for whatever reason, as I was saying, it gets put down or constricted. At that point, if that happens enough, then I'm going to cut off that part of myself because it's overwhelming, it's too much, I can't deal with it. The best thing to do is to just shut it down so I don't feel it. And so as I cut off from myself, I cut off from a lot. And it's that cutting off that doesn't allow me to see others in a more heartfelt or understanding way.
There's so much in that early adaptive phase. And of course, you go into it in your book. I don't know how much depth we can get into it because it's quite complex. But at the same time, there's a certain kind of simplicity to it, is that as mammals, we have to learn to regulate ourselves by being co-regulated with a caregiver, a parent. And if we don't get fed, soothed, nurtured, held, touched, seen,
loved,
yes, all of that, then we're going to make it about ourselves, because we don't make our caregivers wrong. We're going to make it about something's wrong, and it's not my mom or my dad, something's wrong with me. And then that's where the adaptation comes in.
right?
And that the parts of our essence get dissociated and frozen and shoved down.
Right.
So,
and not activated.
Or the possibility of the range of possibility doesn't get in, it's not incepted, but it's not gone. And
Exactly.
why that's so important in relationship to your book is how can we heal, even if we just work with the adaptation area, how can we heal those early childhood things that keep us shoved down, that we're still doing the same patterns that were developed now at 50 or 60 years old.
Right, right. And I think a key to that is the embodiment. I mean, I think that that's where the information is, because that's, you know, stored in the lower brain, and the sensations. I think that's key and the way in. And then having cognitive understanding after that is fine. But I think there's a lot. I think that, like, if somebody has a habit or a pattern, and they just kind of, you know, make this affirmation, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to be strong, you know, all of that, until I actually feel that in my body and have the sensations that tell me I'm strong, then it's not going to happen. It's, you can't will by thinking a pattern away or a habit away. It's just, we don't work that way.
Well, it's often a bypass.
Exactly.
You know, it's
exactly.
a way of not going into the body. And since we live in such, you know, I used to work in the corporate world. I said I worked with heads on sticks. The only reason they have bodies is to take their head to the next meeting.
Absolutely. And a lot of people live that way.
Yeah, but we're so disembodied and we're so techno-focused.
Right.
So how do we reconnect with the body and create alignment and coherence with our body, mind, emotions, spirit?
Right. I'm going to go back, before maybe I get to that, I want to go back a step and clarify what I was saying, when I was saying that I use the example, I want to be strong, how you can't just say I'm going to, but you have to feel it. But I want to make a little caveat there and clarify that you can't, or you can, but it doesn't, it's not the deepest. We want to get to the deepest level of that. And the deepest level of that is not like, I'm going to be strong, I'm going to feel my body, and I'm going to just strengthen and tighten and posture into this strength. That's not the real way in. And some people are teaching that, obviously. You know, the way I see it is that I need to, or want to, be in touch with what I am doing and where I am, and allow that to have its life. And that shifts into the strength. And that's different from pasting it on. It's like if I used it sort of posturally, a lot of people sit like this. That's, you know, a slump or collapsed, whatever we want to call it. And so a lot of the modern teachings say, oh gosh, that's really bad for you. Do this, pull your shoulders back, sit up straight, you know, etc. And most people last here about, I don't know, a minute maybe, and end up back here, right? And so it makes us smile, and it's, oh yeah, yeah, right? So we know from that it's not congruent with my physicality from inside. So we have to go another way. So instead, I want to be in that collapse and not pull myself out of it, and actually recognize and admit and be, I am really collapsed. This is what it feels like. It feels like I'm pulling. Wow, I'm really pulling. And as soon as you feel and are aware that I am really pulling myself, something else comes in that says, oh, I don't really want to do that right now. And that pull down lets go. So it's more about a kind of non-doing. And then that shifts more into an uprightness, which is on the way more to that strength that I was talking about. And that's very different from pasting it on from the outside. Because again, pasting it on, I still have this. I'm still doing this, and I just move it to here. I haven't changed this. This has to be changed. And this is I think the access point. What is it that you're actually doing? Can you come in touch with it? Because again, going back to childhood, a lot of these things were so painful that you never want to be in touch with it. It's painful to be here.
Two things. One, I always say you can't change your mind with your mind, and the mind is regulating, of course, the body. The biggest thing is that we have, I think it's universal too, having taught in different countries and things, where we are is never it. It's always somewhere else. And so we never can do the things you're talking about because we're actually not present. We're either in the remembered past or the imagined future and trying to get somewhere other than where we are. And we talk about that as a postural thing and as how we breathe, how we're suspended in our bodies, how we're supported, and how we're regulated. All of those things come together, but you can't even affect that or work with that if you're not aware of it, if you're trying to be somewhere other than where you are.
Right. And that's probably the biggest issue is that we're not with ourselves. We're disconnected from ourselves, which of course is anxiety producing, because if you don't have yourself, then you should be anxious because things might not go well and you won't be there to see what's going on. So you're anxious. And that's, of course, a world, not a worldwide, but certainly a modern society syndrome. And especially now with what's going on, it's even more.
Somewhere I read that we have between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of them are negative, you know, the negativity bias, and 95% of them are repetitive. So if thoughts, you know, from the reptilian brain we're being fed these thoughts over and over again, how do you see transforming this kind of automatic behavior from the past to what Otto Scharmer calls presencing, which I love, presencing or igniting the new brain, the neocortex, so that we actually can do these movements and actually be with and stay with the movements long enough to feel the change that automatically happens, because I think life wants to move through us and heal automatically.
Absolutely. What you said was about all of these thoughts. Well, the most important work around that, I think, is the work of Sir Charles Sherrington. And Sherrington was a very famous physiologist. And he said that every thought manifests somehow, somewhere as a muscular reality. So just trying to change that thought will not really go anywhere. You must see what that thought has as a muscular reality. Because once you can detect the muscular response, it's not a response, it's one thing. The muscular manifestation, once you can recognize that, that's what changes something.
Poet Basho says there's no such thing as a throwaway gesture.
Absolutely not.
That says so much.
And what you were saying before about the percentages of thought given here and there, you know, F.M. Alexander, who invented the Alexander technique, in one of his books called Man's Supreme Inheritance, he says that, but a large percentage of our thoughts, they're not even ours.
Isn't that also true, though, Betsy, about many of our movements? And they're familial and ancestral, that some of them have been handed down for thousands and thousands of years.
Absolutely. And, you know, when you think about a child learning to walk, you know, they're going to imitate whoever they see. They're going to walk like whatever household they're growing up in and who they watch move. That's how they're going to move.
Yeah.
I actually find it very fascinating when I teach at school. Like there'll be a show, and so the kids' parents will come to see the show, and I'm like, okay, whose parent is that? whose parent is that? And see, how I can, obviously there's some looks sometimes, or the red hair or whatever, but other times it's the movement pattern that is so obviously clear.
Let's go back to trauma for a second.
Yeah.
But we're swimming in this sea of trauma, and much of it comes from early adaptive. It's many other areas where we have trauma, including ancestral and familial and collective, but it really impacts our ability to be present. And it keeps us from tapping into this, something I think you're really interested in, is what I call our essential goodness or our genius.
Yeah.
Talk about how Humanual can help us to become whole when we've been traumatized, and the aspect of how embodiment and feeling our emotions and creating spacious interior allows us to reclaim our natural essence.
Yes. That's a big question.
I just big, sorry. You can take it in bites.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're calling this goodness, I come at a little bit of different perspective, and I call it the internal organization. And it's the internal organization that allowed evolution to evolve. It's, when you see an animal move, you see this coordinated movement that it's not disjointed. It's not like hanging on my limbs kind of thing. It's not like that. That's the internal organization, I believe, that allows evolution to progress in the direction, if you believe in that. And so that, to me, when I work with someone, I know that that's inside all of us, no matter what. I know there's an internal organization that has allowed this person to be here now in this way. We're talking, 5 billion years of evolution. On some level, that is so much stronger and so much more powerful than any trauma that could happen to me. That's how I see things. And I'm not at all minimizing the difficulty that people go through, or I go through, or you go through. We all do. But I think, and it's been my experience, that when I work with someone, there's always somehow a way to get to that. And I think that's, as a trauma therapist or a breathing and movement person, there's always some way to access that. And it's not an alpha doing thing, but it's like when you least expect, it's like it's just this other way into it. But I think for me, the belief I have that is so strong that it's there is what guides me.
That's beautiful. I'm working on a book also. It's called Traumatized, a Love Story.
Yeah.
And I really, the more I work with people, see that there's a force, life wants to live through us.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we look at all of these things we call dysfunctional, or I'm broken and I need to take a workshop to get fixed, I think that's one of those kinds of thoughts that debilitates us, because anything that we say is a dysfunction, as you were talking about in the system, anything that we say as a dysfunction is serving a function. It's actually an act of love that is happening, that our nervous system is smart enough to push down these overwhelming experiences so that we can survive.
Exactly. And then that's a good step. And what is happening on the planet now, I think, which, I don't know how much it's happened before, is that we we want to go from surviving to thriving. And that's different. That's different. And also in terms of the internal organization, if you look at watch a baby, a child move, most children move with grace and fluidity that we're just like, oh, wow. We just like can't help but admire. And even I see this even in children who aren't well. It's interesting that their bodies still often have a sort of plumpiness or fullness or spaciousness, even when they're sick. But again, as life progresses and certain demands are made, or like you were saying, certain things don't get addressed or do get addressed, or it comes in different levels, that gets covered up. And as defenses, we create we create these patterns, these adaptive patterns as defenses, and the adaptive patterns interfere with this primary organization, and that includes breath. I mean, right now the way people breathe is really not productive, and we've lost this connection to our expansion contraction of breath that takes us into connection with the world around us.
I love that you look at the body as a system. I think you said something like, you don't feel your body, you feel what you're talking about, your current state of organization.
Exactly.
So systems perspective, but it's not only my body, because you're over here talking to me, but you're also in my nervous system. I'm over in your nervous system. So where does that system doesn't seem to stop. And then you go, oh, well, I'm breathing the air from the trees, I'm eating from the earth, I'm getting the sun.
Yeah.
That's just in this solar system. We haven't gone to the galactic or the larger system of which we're a part, which is just this amazing miracle. But again, in every time, life wants to live and life wants to evolve.
Right.
If you just take the breath, it's a recorder that's probably more accurate than your reptilian brain, because I notice I had a lot of trauma early on. I noticed that there's ways that I breathe, and I meditate a lot, there's this part of my breath that goes at the end of the breath. And I know that's from early trauma. I don't always know what part of, because I had a lot of trauma, but I know that's in there. How do I deal with that? How do we deal with that when it's recorded in our breath? And when we start to learn how to breathe, often when I teach meditation, people won't want to go on, because when they smooth that out, things they don't want to feel come up.
Exactly. Well, see, then you've done your job. It's a choice. If your job, my job is to point out that this is how you're breathing very high, and that serves a purpose. It brings in the auxiliary muscles, and it'll give you extra breath when you need it. But for an everyday breath, it's not the most efficient. So then somebody says, okay, well, I'll give this a whirl. And they allow a different kind of breath. We'll say for now, I'll talk more about that in a minute, but a different kind of breath. And like you said, they start feeling some emotion and something comes up. Then they can choose to address that and work through it or understand it or whatever words we want to use. Or they can say, that's a bit much, I don't ever want to do that, and go back to this, and who are we to stop them? I have very specific ideas about breathing that differ a bit from much of what is taught. And the main difference is it's a very common directive in breathing circles today to say, breathe into your belly. I don't agree with that phrase, because when you breathe and you think about it, where does the air actually, when you breathe, where does the air actually go? It goes into your lungs. And yes, your belly responds, but air does not go into your belly. So that pattern of pushing air into your belly, yes, it's used in certain yogic practices for certain states, but it's not a daily moment to moment breath because air doesn't go to your belly. It just doesn't.
Well, not only that, I mean, I know, again, speaking as a trauma survivor, that my trauma is mostly held in my heart and lung and chest area. And
Right.
so breathing into the belly for me doesn't actually touch the part that is the most traumatized in my body. And I can feel that collapse that's there. I can feel that rounding in that collapse of protection from getting hurt a lot as a child,
Yeah.
And so I really work on bringing not only into my chest, but into my side body. And we don't pay any attention really to our back
Exactly.
behind us,
Right. And yes. And again, when you mentioned this sort of rounding, that you actually come in touch with that rounding and recognize that your ribs attached to your sternum in the front and your spine in the back, and that there's a roundness to them. And then you get that attachment onto your back, which then allows a bit more space for your back to lengthen, and there's more breath. There was a bigger breath. I hope that was okay. I should have asked permission to use you.
Oh, no, it's great.
That was just a
I'm
moment.
a willing subject.
It seemed a perfect moment to what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's exactly right too. I mean, my experience is exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it brings up old images and pictures and thoughts.
Yeah.
And some of them I don't really want to be with, but I've worked with some of the trauma things that have happened. I've literally titrated, gone back and see, where it was just a flash of light. What happened was so horrible, some of the things.
Right. Yeah.
And so I've taken my self back to the scene over and over again, watched my breath keep going. And I know it's not all integrated, but it's, it's taken me many years to integrate that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one thing and ask you a question about it, actually.
I see. Yeah. Something. Yeah.
And I saw a really horrible thing as a child. And I worked back to my grandmother screaming and pulling my arm.
Right.
And got that far, but it's still got that kind of, whenever I do it, it's got, and I do Tai Chi and yoga and things like that.
Interesting. Do you want to do something with it?
Sure. Okay.
So kind of related to what we were talking about here is that we want to talk about your whole spine, because there's this curve. If you put your fingers just in front of the hole in your ear and a little bit lower, where my fingers would meet in the middle of my head, that's the top of my spine. Where my fingers meet, that's where my head meets my spine. So why is that important? That's important because that's where my head actually moves from. Most people don't move their head from here. They move it from the base of their spine. As we recognize this is the top of your spine, and just know that letting your head not drop there, but just have a time, yes, just that much, which is really just not a drop down. There's a little bit more length potential in your spine.
Yeah.
And it's not a linear length, but an opening, so lengthening and a widening. Now, recognize that along with that is this a little bit of widening in through here, because this is happening, the expansion is happening in your torso. So there's a bit more, yes, letting your lungs fill, and then switch your hands to here.
To my shoulders.
Your shoulders, and just don't pull them back. And again, the common directive is pull your shoulders back. Well, that's just really going to give you pain back there. But instead, as your spine lengthens, just allow a tiny bit of widening here. Yes, coming from this.
Yeah.
Yes. And then just ever so gently with that widening, just start exploring a little bit of movement from that widening place, connected and widened, coming right out of your back, fanning out. The latissimus dorsi just fans beautifully.
Mostly I feel it right in my,
Here, the sternum here. Yeah. And what do you feel there? What is it?
there's a tightness and a little bit of pain, actually.
Okay to stay with it? Just seeing the relationship of this to the widening to here, that sort of, maybe call it a diamond shaped for now. And again, back to this widening here. And then just exploring again that movement.
It's not making that sound now, but it's not as big a movement as I was.
Right. But just recognize that it's not making the sound.
Mhm.
And what it feels like, what you feel like as you move without that extra pull.
Yeah, it's great. It occurs to me, Betsy, that what we just did is an example of co-regulation leading to self-regulation. And I think that's something we need to talk about because it's important in this area, because you don't have, I don't think people realize they try to power self-regulation, kind of like you were talking about, I'm going to be big and strong or whatever. But you can't have self-regulation until you can have co-regulation. And that's essentially what it is. And it really speaks in the face of, particularly with men, you know, the strong, I'm going to do it myself. I'm a self-made man. I know a lot of self-made women too. So I'm not just saying.
That's true too, right? Right.
But that brings us back to a place of connection, though, when we realize, oh, you know, these things to heal, it's likely that I can I can look at Betsy's book and I can learn a lot and I can create more movement, but to deal with the trauma part of it, you have to have either a group or another person to co-regulate. And I'm wondering your thoughts about that.
Yes, but if, and this is controversial probably, if we have connection to something large, like a divine of some sort, does that count?
Yeah, I think we can co-regulate with whatever our idea of divine, God, higher power, whatever that is. That
okay, as long as that's included, then
that's included as a co-regulation, I think.
All right, then I'm on board.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
So, you know, another area that I want to make sure we talk about is how you talk about life force, how it moves through expansion and contraction, which we were just looking at, and how the movement can help to heal and help us move towards healing, towards wholeness, to becoming whole. But it's the expansion and contraction, as Peter so beautifully talks about, and you do too in your book.
Yeah, I think for me, Peter's concept of pendulation is wonderful. For me, I would talk about my idea of support. So I'll just talk us through, and it's for everybody. As we come in touch with whatever is under us. So if you're standing, it's your feet on the ground. If you're sitting, it's your feet and your hips on the chair and maybe your back. Whatever is touching what is under you, if you come in touch with that, become aware of that. And then recognizing that we live in a gravitational field and we need to adapt to that. So we have gravity coming toward the planet, and the planet is spinning, giving off a centrifugal force. So something is doing this. There's something on the planet that has the trees grow, the grass, something says this. So we have this coming this way and this coming this way. So as I bring my attention to what's under me, I have a sense of the weight or the contact. And then I recognize the ground is under me, and that I can easily know. But what's more important, or as important, or relative, is that the ground is under me in a supportive way. So whatever's under me is supporting me. And that's an actual, genuine experience that I can have in each moment. So in that moment, I've gone from a little bit compressed to feeling that support come through me, which is a slight expansion or potential expansion. And then often there's a breath. And then I allow, if I'm standing, I allow that support to come up through my ankles, or even if I'm sitting. Like I can check in with myself. Can I be open enough to receive the support from the ground in my ankles, my knees, my hips, the major joints in my legs? And then if I'm sitting from the chair, coming up through my pelvis and my spine, and then out to my shoulders, my chest, my arms are supported from what's under me. And the more I have that support, the less I'm pulled off it, like you showed us with your pattern. And then also into my neck and my head. And then from there, I look around the room, because I have my ground, what's under me, my support, myself. And like we said before, the room, I'm part of the room, which includes you and my room that's here. And that's different.
And this is so good for people who have had this not feeling supported as a child, and how that's gone into their work life, into their relationships.
Yeah.
We can just learn to do that kind of an exercise. Oh, I feel the earth under me. I feel my pelvis on the floor.
I feel supported. Yeah.
I feel the pull and the support.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about this really square one, because if I don't know that I'm supported, then I'm going to hold myself up. I'm going to, one way or another, hold myself up. But when I get that I'm connected to what's under me, I can't fall down. There's no down. There's nowhere to go.
And I love the orienting part too. After you do it, then that's the neuroception part too. Maybe we should talk a little bit about neuroception. Is it safe? Do I,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And especially if I was going into some kind of flashback or trauma experience, and I have all this, and I look around and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm fine. I'm not in that moment of that traumatic thing that happened. That's not what's happening now. I can have a different bodily experience, which then informs my brain that I'm okay and I don't have to produce that anxiety. And then it goes back, oh, I'm not anxious. Oh, good. And then we, there's this integration, breath changes, homeostasis changes, the length of the muscles, and, et cetera.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so let's talk then. There's so much more I want to cover here, but let's talk about stress, anxiety, cortisol, and how to downregulate ourselves when we're feeling this overwhelming, whatever overwhelms us.
Well, I think the support exploration that I just did with everybody has the potential to absolutely downregulate. I mean, for me, that's a global downregulating, but also an individual too. And of course, there's always the longer exhale, which engages your vagus nerve to downregulate. There's that.
Do you want to talk a little bit about Stephen Porges's work and the polyvagal? It's I don't know if you can encapsulate it. It's a big thing to fully comprehend.
Right.
At least we can talk about.
Yeah. It's
autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, in a short, like you say, in a short moment, it's basically we have, well, jump right in. We have 3 responses to our environment, and especially to danger. And either we feel safe or we feel possible danger or we feel life threat. And there's 3 branches of the nervous system that address that. And we are in one or the other all the time. And we go from one to the other rather quickly and often. And it's his theory based on, 500 million years ago, when we were sort of creatures at the bottom of the sea. Our response to danger was to freeze and not move, and to conserve energy and to not be seen. If I don't get seen, I won't be eaten, kind of thing. And then 300 million years ago, we developed striated muscles, these, muscles that can move us. So when danger appeared, we got to run away, power, or, to flee or to fight, but again, that's muscular movement and activated. And then the most recent is the ventral. As humans, when danger presents itself to us, we don't immediately always freeze, or we don't immediately always beat the crap out of the other person. We say like, oh, wait a minute, let's talk about this. Let's see if we can come to some agreement, or, is this really danger? Or, you evaluate a little, you look with your eyes, you listen carefully, you sense the breath that's happening, all of these sort of ventral systems get information. And that's our way to detect safety, but it's also our initial question of danger.
And also to create safety. I mean, we could use a lot more ventral in the world right now.
That's true.
Yeah, because we're in the other two or three most of the times, either fight or flight or freeze, or just
the variations of that. Yeah,
right.
Well, because we have this dangerous thing that is, who knows where it's going to be. I mean, before we were talking about co-regulation, and now we don't know if the mail person who delivers our mail and hands it to us is giving us COVID or not. I mean, it's not that simple in a way, but it's like, whoa, I don't want to talk to you. You might be breathing on me and making me sick. When in another time and place, it would be like, oh, here's the mail. I enjoy a conversation with you,
Yeah, this is being promulgated by the media also. So
the divisiveness going on, which we won't even get into, of how one should deal with this issue.
Yeah, I know. I've been struggling with that one myself.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about resilience. I think that's an important thing. Our ancestors have dealt with not just viruses, but with plagues, with war, with famine, with disease. All the Malthusian checks have all been, boxed. So we have developed over hundreds of thousands of years a natural resiliency. But for the most part, it seems that fear and anxiety and the current conditions don't let us tap into that natural sense of being resilient. How can your work with the body and the body awareness and the whole system's perspective, looking at the system, help us to be able to meet the challenges that we're up against right now and be more resilient in the face of crumbling institutions, shortages, all the things that are happening, climate change?
Yeah, it's interesting because Humanual was finished it came out in May 2020, right as the pandemic came along. So the book was written before the pandemic. I think the stimulus is greater now. So we're developing new responses. I think we're learning about what you're talking about. I think for myself and in my teachings, that strengthening the things I've already talked about is the resilience that we're all called to go a little deeper.
Well, Betsy, we're getting close to the end here, but I'll just throw out another little subject to wind us up, and that is the idea of the unified field of universal love as the ultimate healing practice and healing presence. And your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the lesson of what's going on now. And again, I think we're all learning how to talk about this and to ideas on it, but somehow I know it's there because I've had the experience of it. So I know it's there. How to have it, experience it more now, or it is an exploration now. You know, it's
I think the more we can presence ourselves in our body with our emotions, the more capacity we have to feel the others. And I think part of the practice of developing our own deeper sense of self-love, not in a narcissistic way, but honoring that this body and this life is a miracle.
And
we build a capacity in relatedness, and of course emotions are the fabric of relatedness. If we can build that capacity one nervous system at a time, by connecting, that's part of how I think that we'll be able to perhaps create an evolutionary jump, which is what I'm rooting for.
Right, me too. But I think that part of that is using our bodies, our body, mind, self, spirit in the way that, well, especially the physicality in its design, like with breath. People breathe through their mouth. Your nose is put on your face to breathe. That's what's made to breathe. And when you move or you stand, you hold yourself a certain way. That's not how we're made to like, if you stand and you lock your knees, that's a common pattern. You're pushing your knees backwards. They don't bend backwards, they bend forward. And so for me, all of those, the depth of the resilience that we're going into now makes it even more important to follow our design and listen to, because when I do that, I connect to a deeper cosmic presence of that unified love. And so for me, to get to that is through the body, because this is what I have. And it's got a very specific design. And when people follow that, there's much less dis-ease. Obviously not fully, you know, but it has a way it works, that we work.
Yeah, so, and awareness is the healing. There's nothing broken, it's aware, you know, like I was working with someone the other day and they always stood with their hip out, standing on one foot.
Yeah.
What's going on, you know, with that?
And I have
the awareness, immediately they straightened up, just bringing awareness. No, I didn't know I did that.
Let me tell you an interesting story on that. So I had a acting student that always leaned this way. And he says, whenever I'm on stage, the director's always telling me, you're leaning on one leg, don't do that, put your feet on both. He said, but every time I do it, I can't do it. I can't stay there, it's uncomfortable. I don't like to do it. So I said, okay, stay here. Go to where you like to be, and let's just stay there a minute and see what happens. So he went there, and he's staying there. And after a couple of minutes, he said, it's funny, I just had this memory. I said, oh, what's the memory? He said, when I was in school, I was young, maybe in first grade, in school, we could wear whatever we want. He went to that kind of school. But one day we had what was called a dress-up day. So my dad got me a tie and a little jacket, and I went to school. And he said, I went to school and I had this tie on and nobody else had a tie. And this is what he did. He said, I had this tie. I was so embarrassed of that tie. I just stood like this all day. And I said, that. Yeah. And he was like, oh. And then he just.
That's beautiful. Now, if you're listening to this on the radio, what Betsy did was hold the tie and lean over and put her weight on one side.
Yeah, sorry, I yeah. Yeah. And then once he realized that, he just came back to center and both feet plopped back to the ground, and that was it for him. Mm-hmm. You never know, right?
And that was a trauma integration that happened through awareness.
Exactly.
Not getting his body fixed, not changing anything, just with awareness.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the brilliance of the work you're doing. I just want to put a plug in for Humanual, a manual for being human, an epic journey to your expanded self. And you can go to Humanual, HUMANUAL.com, and you can get a copy of it and find out a lot more about Betsy Polatin's work. So Betsy, thank you for the time and for the wisdom that you shared with us today. It's really wonderful to be with you.
Thank you, Michael. I too have thoroughly enjoyed our time together and found our conversation exciting and informative. So thank you.
All right. Well, I hope we can do it again sometime, because there's so much more in the book that we could talk about. And yeah, just thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you. Take care.
We Earth Radio is an independently produced program supported by listeners like you. We are committed to bringing you leading-edge thinkers in the areas of environmental restoration, social justice, conscious evolution, and spiritual fulfillment. If you would like to receive our complimentary newsletter, The Well of Light, make a contribution, or listen to any of our past shows, go to our website, welloflight.com. Thank you so much for your commitment to a world that works for all life.